In just 1 month, Harold Gene Lucas is scheduled to die by lethal injection. Unless a court intervenes, the state of Florida will carry out his execution nearly 50 years after the murder of 16-year-old Jill Piper. After spending almost half a century on death row, Lucas is now entering what could be the final stage of one of Florida's longest-running capital punishment cases. Harold Gene Lucas is a 74-year-old inmate on Florida's death row. He was convicted of the 1976 murder of his 16-year-old girlfriend, Jill Piper, and the attempted murders of 2 of her teenage friends, Richard Byrd Jr. and Terry Rice. Nearly 50 years later, his execution is now scheduled unless the courts decide otherwise. Jill Piper was only 16 years old. According to court records, she was killed during the 1976 attack. Richard Byrd Jr. and Terry Rice survived and later testified, providing key evidence that helped lead to Lucas's conviction. This courtroom photograph shows Harold Gene Lucas during his murder trial. A jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder. He was sentenced to death, beginning what would become nearly 5 decades of appeals through Florida and federal courts. Here's how the case unfolded. 1976. Jill Piper is murdered. Richard Byrd Jr. and Terry Rice survive. 1977. Lucas is convicted and sentenced to death. Over the following decades, the case moves through multiple appeals and court reviews. Then, on July 31, 2026, Governor Ron DeSantis signed Lucas's death warrant. Unless something changes through the courts, Florida plans to carry out the execution in early September. A death warrant is the governor's official order setting an execution date. Once it is signed, the case enters its final legal stage. Attorneys can still file appeals, request a stay of execution, or seek clemency. However, the legal options become much more limited because the execution date has now been set. Every filing made after this point is reviewed under strict deadlines. One of the most common questions viewers ask is why a death penalty case can take decades to reach an execution date. Capital cases receive extensive review through both state and federal courts. Judges examine constitutional claims, trial procedures, and sentencing issues. While these appeals can take many years, they exist to ensure that both the conviction and the sentence comply with the law before an execution is carried out. Cases like Harold Gene Lucas's illustrate just how lengthy that process can become. Lucas remains housed at Florida State Prison in Rayford. Although an execution date has been scheduled, additional legal filings remain possible. Any significant court ruling, stay of execution, or clemency decision could affect what happens next. As of today, however, Florida continues moving forward. Nearly 50 years have passed since Jill Piper lost her life. Now, the legal process is approaching what could be its final chapter. Whether the execution proceeds as scheduled or new legal developments emerge, this case continues to raise questions about justice, due process, and the length of appeals. If you want factual, timely updates on death penalty cases across the United States, consider subscribing to Case File Reports. Here, I follow cases from the signing of a death warrant through every major appeal, court hearing, clemency decision, and the final legal outcome. Every report is based on official court records, verified legal filings, and publicly available information. If Harold Gene Lucas's case changes in any meaningful way, you'll hear about it here. Do you think nearly 50 years is too long for a death penalty case to reach its conclusion? Or are decades of appeals necessary to ensure justice? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next report.